Good morning. Today we're working on this Super E carburetor. It's an S&S Super E. It's got a polished bowl or chrome bowl and a polished body. This thing's kind of gummy and gross, so I'm going to tear it down a little way and get it in the ultrasonic today. I don't think I'm going to take it all the way apart. At least at this point I'm not going to. I'm going to try to clean it up and see how clean it gets without tearing the whole thing apart. And if that will work, then I'll be happy. If not, we'll invest in a rebuild kit and we'll get this whole thing rebuilt. But right now, my main focus is going to be just getting this thing apart and getting into the ultrasonic cleaner just to get it kind of cleaned up to see what it looks like once it is clean. I did scrub this carburetor the other day when I washed the engine, and it was covered in, I mean, who knows, all kinds of road grime, looked like bat poop, all kinds of just nastiness. And I would imagine that this bike sat in a barn for a good long while. Of course, it had old fuel in it, and the old fuel, of course, had turned to dust, as it does anymore. And unfortunately, you know, dust doesn't really run these old machines real well. Somebody has gone ahead and replaced the bowl screws with hex head screws, which is kind of nice. In my opinion, they're a little easier to work with than, of course, the old either Phillips screws or the flathead screws that commonly are stripped out on these things. Anxious to get this open and see what's inside of it. See how bad it looks. The bottom drain screw here is really in bad shape. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get that off or not. I'll go ahead and try to remove this inlet here. And as you can see, that's pretty grimy. I don't know if this will turn. It might. It might not. I might have to clean it first before I can get it to spin, but we're going to try it real quick. And it's chewed up on there, unfortunately, so that's not even turning. So I'm going to try to clean it first, and hopefully that will help me to be able to turn that out of there. If not, I'm not sure if I'll be able to get it with a pair of vice grips and twist it, or if it'll damage the bowl completely. May need to replace the bowl. It doesn't leak at this point, but if you wanted to drain the fuel from there, you couldn't do it while it was on the bike, unfortunately. Now you could remove the float bowl itself and then of course dump the fuel out, and that's a way to do it too. Not necessarily the right way, but it is a way that you could do it. The float needle itself looks like it's in pretty good shape. The float does as well. It looks like that might have been replaced recently. And of course, there's some residue in the bottom of that. That's pretty gross. That's that dust I was talking about. Of course, when you mix that with the fuel, then nothing really works right. Of course, this old gasket's in pretty rough shape. Go ahead and get the main jet out here. Of course, that probably won't even show up in the camera, but there's tons of that dust on there. So that was a lot of the reason why this thing was not going to run real well. Like I said, that stuff doesn't really help anything. The enrichener itself looks like it was replaced recently. That looks actually really new. And again, I don't know the history on this bike, so this thing could be in really awesome shape. You know, it doesn't look like it's got a ton of miles on it. Unfortunately, it has an aftermarket speedometer on it, so I don't even know what the mileage, the true mileage is, or where that real speedometer went. This old gasket's gonna come off in pieces, it looks like. It's gonna fight me the entire way. And it doesn't move at all. It's pretty solid on there, unfortunately. That is gross. That is gummy. That definitely is not in good shape. I am not going to take the butterfly out at this point in time. I'm just going to clean it and hope that does a good job. We'll see how that goes. If that does not, then I will remove it. But at this point right now, I'm not going to take that out of there. I am going to get a pick though. I'm going to pull this gasket off as much as possible, try to hook underneath there and yank it off, and hopefully that'll come apart real well. We'll see. Now with my 90-degree pick, I'm just going to pull on this seal here, and it's just going to rip and tear and fall apart. And honestly, I might have to just throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner the way it is and let it disintegrate in there. I don't foresee this. Yeah, it's trying to come apart. Like I said, this thing is solid. It's turned into, it's petrified at this point. That's the best way to put it. This is a petrified gasket. And not that it really matters putting it in the ultrasonic cleaner, but I'd like to have most of the debris removed from the carb body itself before I go ahead and put that in. This is as far as I'm going to take the carb down. At this point, I'm going to throw these parts in the ultrasonic cleaner. We'll run them through 2 30-minute revolutions. One just to kind of get everything moving around and get it degreased. The second one, we'll change out the water. We'll put more, I use Dawn dish soap on these things. It's worked really well for me. I know a lot of guys use different degreasers and whatnot, but for me, Dawn has worked really well. It helps to break down this stuff, and I'll continue to use that until I guess I find something better. But once I have the water changed, I'll go ahead and I'll put another revolution through, and we'll show you what this thing turns out like. So stay tuned, we'll be back with you shortly. It's a new day in the shop. Yesterday, this Super B needed to be cleaned, and I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner. First, I disassembled it, then I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner. I pulled it out, I scrubbed it a little bit, and then I put it back in the ultrasonic cleaner. It took about an hour to get it to the point of where it is right now. And as you can see, brass nozzle here, the inlet tube, everything turned out real nice. It did make the carb body a little less polished. It's got a little oxidation on it now. I think I could polish that up and make it look a little bit better, but for now I'm going to put this thing back together. The one thing that I am missing is the gasket. I do not have the float bowl gasket for it here, so I'm just going to put this thing back together, show you guys that process, and then dig for that float bowl gasket this weekend. I have a whole bunch of carburetor parts in a bin, and with all the stuff that I have kind of laying around, I don't know which bin it's in right now. I've moved some things around. When I moved into this shop, everything kind of got shuffled in a bunch of different places. And unfortunately, when that happened, I lost track of a few things. So anyway, we're gonna get to putting this back together. I'm gonna start with the main body here. We're gonna put the nozzle back in place. We'll snug that in. I did spray all of the passages with brake part cleaner too, and dried these things off of that because that flashes pretty fast, and it does make it a lot easier to clean these. With that nozzle installed, we'll go ahead and work on the top side of the carb here, get everything back to being reinstalled. And I know I'll have to adjust this stuff once I get it put back together and put the enriching her back in place. Tighten that up. Next we'll work on the float bowl. We'll put the needle back onto the float. That's always a fun one to hang on there. Now with that hanging in place, we'll put the inlet tube back in its spot and get that needle to seat in there. Oh, I pulled the needle off. We'll put the inlet tube in first, then we'll hang the needle. Probably be easier to do it that route, honestly. Or so I think, maybe not. All right, and I've got the needle and seat back in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the carb bowl back onto the carb body for now. I just want to keep these parts together, so I'm just going to put them back together for now, just so that they're all together and I'm not going to lose any screws. Because I know if I leave the setting apart for too long, I'll end up putting the screws in a bin somewhere, and then I'll be a mess, and then I won't be able to find them. Not that I can't order new ones, but it'd be nice to just use what I've got. We're just going to loosely put those in place for now, because I will be taking this back apart once I get that gasket. And there we have it. One S&S Super B carburetor cleaned and put back together. I really do feel that this thing's going to run a lot better now that it is actually cleaner. It did, like I said, have, gasoline dust inside of it, and that stuff's never any good. And it was gumming up some of the passageways. That main jet right through the middle there, the main vent, was not flowing fuel properly, and I know this thing wasn't working at its optimal. It wasn't working like it was supposed to. So now that I've got it back together, I'm going to hang on to it like this. I'm going to get the rest of the parts. Hopefully this weekend I'll find them from the house, and I'll show you guys that process of just putting the gasket on. Super easy. Just the gasket goes in between there, and that's all it takes. I think I've got another rubber O-ring for the intake side of this, and I'd like to replace that as well. Well guys, I wanted to bring you through the process of putting together this Super B. I know it's not complete yet, but I wanted to show you the ins and outs of how this thing went back together and how clean it actually came out. Short video for today, but this is all the time that I have, so I wanted to make a quick video to show you what I had going on. As always, I appreciate you guys sticking around till the end. We'll see you next time.